Hi, I'm Abba,
I'm Ruth.
and along with our colleague Manju, we are the education team at Reading International Solidarity Centre.
And we're going to share with you now some information and history of the education team at RISC.
So the area that we work in is Global Citizenship Education, also sometimes called Development Education. And Global Citizenship Education is concerned with the planet that we all live on and share, and how we can live on this planet in a sustainable way, and the people that live on this planet, and issues of inequality and social justice in regards to the people who share this planet, and of course the connections between these two concerns, both in the local context and in the global context. Global citizenship is not just about learning about these issues, it is also about how we equip learners to be agents for change, to help make the world a better place. Global citizenship education also invites us to think about what the purpose of formal education is. Is it about equipping young people to adapt to the way that the world is? Is it about developing the kind of thinking and critical thought that might lead young people to question and contest the way the world is? Or perhaps somewhere in between? Reading International Solidarity Centre is part of a consortium of similar education centres around the country. The consortium is called CODEC, the Consortium of Development Education Centres. We work with a number of organisations who do similar work. So Oxfam, for example, do lots of work in global citizenship, have several school and teacher guides. The UN Sustainable Development Goals can be a very useful framework. They also have lots of resources for schools and teachers. And the British Council's Connecting Classrooms project also offer a range of global citizenship opportunities and teacher education. At RISC, we often use the Oxfam framework and resources as they are very in line with our approaches around global citizenship. One of the resources that has been developed at RISC, Reading International Solidarity Centre, is this resource here on the right. How do we know it's working? And this resource has a range of activities for primary and secondary schools that aim to understand what children know and think about a range of social justice and environmental issues. These activities, these audit activities, allow teachers to get a snapshot of what children and young people actually think, can then be used to inform their teaching and planning. We are going to show you a few of the activities to give you a flavour of how we use them and what we find. So in this activity, Is This a Family? Children are given a selection of photographs and they are asked to sort the photographs into those that they see as depicting a family and those that they would not consider a family. So you might like to take a moment to think about what kinds of criteria children and young people are using to decide which of the images are families. What we find in our work is that children have often quite clear ideas about which of the photographs are families. They are generally looking for a mum and a dad, for there to be children, and sometimes also expecting a family to be people of the same ethnicity. And these findings are true even where children themselves may live in family structures that are different to these ideas. In this activity, children are given a blank outline of the continent of Africa, and they are asked, what would you find if you visited a country in Africa? And children can draw or write anything that comes to mind on the sheet of paper. We analyse their notes and pictures by looking at a few different categories. So how many things are they saying about the natural environment, the built environment, people in society, culture and history, energy, transport and communication, so modern technologies, economic activity, and countries and features, geographical features. And you can see the percentages here of typically what we find in our analysis. So we find that young people have very little knowledge of modern technologies and economic activities. And much of the other information that they have is often inaccurate or through a very narrow lens. Common things that young people say is it's a place of poverty and famine, disease and illness, little or education, little economic activity or technologies, and hot, dry landscape. So little understanding of the diversity and variation on this huge continent. You can see some of the images here that young people have done in response to this activity. In this activity, children are given a selection of cards and asked what's the best way to protect the environment. They need to arrange the cards in a diamond, putting at the top things what they think is most important and what's least important at the bottom of the diamond line. So what you see on the screen here is a very typical arrangement. So children will often put recycle everything you can at the top, and then perhaps decisions that they less often make themselves, like travelling by plane, will often be at the bottom. And what we would like to see is we would like to see young people understand that those three big important environmental activities of recycle, reuse and reduce are not equivalent, but there is a hierarchy, and that actually at the top of the diamond line you want to be having those activities that are about reducing consumption, and then looking at reusing things, and recycling is a kind of last resort.
So with all these activities, it helps us to understand the myths or misrepresentations of the world that children and young people pick up, and it identifies what stereotypes or misconceptions they may have about people living around the world, in order that we can plan to challenge these stereotypes and tackle the myths and misinformation that they may have. So the work that we do at RISC in the education team is built on the long-standing work of these three people. So Barbara, Louise and Liz worked in Reading International Solidarity Centre, set it up in its beginning stages. Barbara was involved right from the start. And so a lot of what we do builds on all the projects and educational resources that this team has developed. So some of the earlier projects that the team were involved in were arts-based, so they were looking at arts from around the world, arts being something that is common to everyone across the globe and in different ways and different forms. So these three projects were around looking at traditional art forms This one in Guatemala, linking issues around identity with the Mayan weaving of women in Guatemala. And in India, looking at India, we also looked at contemporary block printing, and children were able to learn about block printing and then have a go themselves at printing contemporary designs. The Bogolan mudcloths from Mali were explored in this resource, which linked to the colonial history of Mali and some of the pre-colonial structures that exist in Mali, and also using the mudcloths as a way of bringing in the creative and artistic aspects. A lot of teaching resources have been developed over the years through different projects. There's been a lot of work related to fair trade, so looking at what children and young people buy, the products that we consume, thinking about the supply chain of the products that we eat and the products that we use in our daily lives, thinking about how they impact on the environment and the people in that supply chain, and thinking about more ethical and sustainable models of consumerism. The Uganda UK pack was put together for schools in Reading who had links with schools in Uganda, and they were keen to find photographs which challenged stereotypes of countries in Africa and which showed similarities with their pupils in the UK. So this is a really lovely photo pack for teachers with schools in other countries, with partner schools in other countries. There's been some early years work that was developed through the Grown Up Global pack. So this again is still on sale in our shop, and it's got lots of activities for the early years EYFS curriculum. And part of the project was building these story tents, which are still available on loan from the centre. And the story tent links to different themes, different country themes, different stories, and brings in creative ideas for exploring the world through stories. This is our refugee tent, again available to borrow from the centre. This was put together with a refugee project, and young refugees talked about their experiences and their lives in the UK, their interests, what they were passionate about, and created these panels for the story tent. So when schools borrow them, there's stories in pockets inside the tent, so young people can go inside and find out more through going inside the tent. All these resources are available on our website, so you can book through our website and have a look at the artefact collections that we have. So we have different boxes available with artefacts, picture books, teaching resources, which link to different themes, different country themes, or different global citizenship themes. This was a project which was around local elders who were sharing their stories of migration. This is the story cloth. So the elders told stories, shared their experiences with children and young people, and the story cloth was created in the classrooms by weaving their stories into this beautiful cloth. Again, this is another one that's available, or the ideas of how this was developed can be replicated in schools locally. We did a collaborative project with the October Gallery in London. This is a gallery that promotes artists from the Global South, and we put together these teaching packs related to different artists from different countries around the world, exploring the issues that they explore, and lots of really creative ideas for the classroom. So the one that's shown here is a class that were developing some work around Romuald Hazome and his reuse of oil cans. He is from Benin, and he reused these oil cans to create these African masks, and children in the classroom were learning about recycling and reusing, so they could develop their research and develop their own masks through learning about recycling and reusing. This was the more fair trade projects that were linked to the fashion industry, so researching supply chains in the fashion industry, reusing and recreating fashion items, doing a fashion display and catwalk, And then some of the other resources related to bananas or chocolate or computers, so things that are very familiar with children and things that they use every day but that connect them to people and places around the world. Again, the Uganda and UK pack, and developing on from the international partnerships, this pack, Europe, Africa, Y, is related to the historical connections between Europe and Africa. It looks at some of the myths and misconceptions about the continent of Africa. It looks about the inequalities between the two continents and the origins of those inequalities, and looking at colonial history and contemporary trade and relationships between the two continents. A lot of resources we have on this website, which is put together to look at challenging Islamophobia. There's some videos, there's lots of information with teaching resources, thinking about how we can incorporate Islam and the history of Islam, and how a lot of the things that we use every day and in science and technology stem from the historical Islamic world. So again, lots of resources that can be used through our website. Some examples here of a longer term project which we worked with 5 local councils, local authorities, to develop work in different subject areas. So thinking about how we might incorporate global thinking in English or in foreign languages, thinking about how we might develop the resources that we have in schools, how we might develop our resources in the libraries in our schools. So how can we evaluate the resources that we use in schools? And from these trainings were put together and developed and shared more widely. So some of this work has been shared nationally. So the Global Citizenship Advocates course was developed with RISC and Mary Young, and now has developed into the Global Teacher Award, which is delivered through the Consortium for Development and Education Centres. And it pulls together a lot of the training that we've done over the years, looking at exploring controversial issues, exploring ways that we can develop thinking and critical thinking in particular, and how we can measure the impact of the work that we do. And as Abba spoke about earlier, the How Do We Know It's Working pack is a brilliant tool for schools that are getting started to think about what their children are thinking, what misconceptions they have, what their ideas are about the world. And you can still buy this from our shop or by sending us an email. It's £25 for the book, and there's lots of resources online as well you can access.
Okay, so that's a quick tour of some of the work that RISC has done over the years. Thinking about the future, some of the key areas that we are currently working in and developing as we look forward is critical thinking and developing critical thinking with young people. Our main methodology that we use is P4C, Philosophy for Children. That's both using those techniques and methodologies in our own work, but also supporting teachers in developing their own P4C practice in their own schools. In the last year, we've seen a rise in schools and education authorities being interested in developing their anti-racism practice, and we have been finding some ways to meet those needs and help them with resources and teacher training. And one particular area of the curriculum that has been in focus over the last year is looking at the history curriculum, both at primary school and secondary school, and thinking about the ways in which history more accurately reflects Britain's global past, and how we bring that into schools in ways that open up young people's views, not just of history, but understanding contemporary relationships and issues with nations across the world.